Hi there. It's a cold February day, but it's lovely. It's nice and sunny. I've got Tasky out with me because we're on fields I know really well and they're big, and he's been chasing hares and all sorts of things. But they are decoying pigeons as well and all the old cover crops around here. So he's getting quite interested in that, but so far so good. He's been sticking fairly close. As I said, I know these fields really well, but they still come up with some really nice surprises. And amongst them is, I didn't have my speaker set up because I don't find an awful lot of stuff here really anymore. So we're really just out for a nice time. But I must have been over here, a million times. Always comes up with something. I found a little medieval buckle, and then this, and it's a Jetton, but it's an early one, and it is in absolutely beautiful condition. It's not a classic rose and orb sort of Crowwinkle Nuremberg. I think it's a French one, and it's an absolute stunner. Tasky, come here. And it was literally on the surface. I must have walked over here, well, countless times, but that's really, really nice. That's makes it all worthwhile, and it's lovely to be able to bring him out. Tasky, drop. Ooh, I don't even have much time out. I've only got a couple of hours this morning, and to find something like this is really, well, makes it all worthwhile. We might even go back to headquarters quickly and have a look at this, because it's a particularly good one. Hi there, and thanks for joining me. I quite often get asked in videos, or rather after I've produced the video, what's a Jetton? I get asked that more than I get asked about most things that I find, but it got me to thinking that I'm as guilty as anyone of assuming that people just automatically should know as much about what we find as we do. In fact, in researching these, I realised how little that I actually did know about these, and I was still assuming that other people knew about them. So having found this really lovely one yesterday, it gave me a really good excuse to explain exactly what Jettons are, and in doing so, I learned a lot more about them than I thought I knew. In fact, more than that, they're not exactly what I thought they were anyway, if that makes any sense, but we'll come to it. A Jetton is a reckoning counter. Basically, they were produced to use with the equivalent of a flat abacus called a counting cloth or a counting card or counting table. When your abacus went like that with beads, these things were flat, but they worked in exactly the same way. And these were effectively counters or Jettons, reckoning counters, to be used for these numerical calculations. They'd been used for centuries, but the ones that we're going to concern ourselves with today are the medieval ones and post-medieval ones. I was really fortunate enough fairly recently to find an English one. Now, these are fairly early. These date to late 12th century through to the 14th century, late 14th century, I think. Mainly under the rules of Edward the First to the Third. The reason they became slightly less fashionable and went out of circulation, or production rather, was that the French ones were being produced more cheaply or became more available, and England decided to import these rather than make their own. And this is the one we found yesterday. It dates to the late 14th century and is a Châtel Tournois type with a sort of three-banded cross or whatever it's called with fleur-de-lis and all sorts of things on the reverse. It's in really good condition, and some of these coins, especially the earlier French ones, survive quite well. They're quite thick, they're well made, they all have legends when the English ones don't so much. This one's a quite nice one. It's the fish type, the dolphin type. We can date that fairly certainly to 1349 or later, because it wasn't actually used by the oldest prince of France until that date. And that's got a legend which reads, Le noble et fier poisson, noble and loyal fish. In fact, I'm led to believe all the legends of these French ones and the German ones were quite often used for religious and political propaganda reasons too. So we have our English ones, then the French ones, which became sort of prevalent from 1300s, 1400s. They're thicker and they're really nice to hold and touch. That one's a crown type. That was introduced in 1340 or something like that, so we can date that. So they're mainly 14th century and in really good condition, these ones. I think it's the middle of the 17th century when Arabic numerals became much more common and numerical calculations much easier, that these tokens became sort of basically obsolete, as were the counting tables, the counting cloths, etc. But not before these started becoming much more obvious and prevalent in this country. They're what's called Nuremberg Jettons, and they were produced in Germany in the 15th century, 16th century, 17th century. Most of them are much, much thinner, much easier to make, much cheaper to produce. And these, therefore, became much more common. And I don't suspect necessarily replaced the French ones, but you just find more of them about. And come the end of the sort of 17th century, well, there were no longer need for them. But that's not to say that they weren't still produced or used as gaming tokens. They became very collectible apparently as well. This one, I think, is an earlier Nuremberg. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's certainly thicker than these ones. These make a terrible sound when you're detecting. They're very, very coppery, very, very dull sounding, because actually if you look at them like that, they're exactly the same width and shape as a cartridge cap. And God, we know what those sound like. This one, as I said, is it's got the Lion of St. Mark on it, and that actually dates it to 1562, I think. These were all produced by the Krauwinkel family in Nuremberg, and their names and the city will be on the legends. So, a very brief look at Jettons. There's been a lot written about them. There's a lot online about them, so you can easily do your own research. But as I said, this one I found yesterday just reminded me not to assume that people know what we're talking about, because not everyone does, and why should they? And not to assume either that we know what we're talking about, because I learned a lot from actually researching them for this video. My main mistake was that I thought they were used as currency in times of shortage, but I think I was wrong. If you know different, please leave it in the comments below. And good luck in finding these, because I find fewer of these than I do hammered coins. And to me, they're often more special. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.